We begin our special coverage tonight with the former RNC chairman and former lieutenant governor of Maryland, Michael Steele, who supported Joe Biden's election, and Maya Wiley, a former civil prosecutor in the Southern District of New York and former mayoral candidate. Your thoughts tonight, Michael?
It's a humbling day in many respects. It is a day of reflection. It is a day of acknowledgement. And it's also a day in which I think there's a growing pressure now on the country. Forget the politicians who, we oftentimes fixate on. I think it's a pressure on the country now, on citizens, to ask themselves, what do you think about this? Do you really believe this was just some random dudes who showed up at the Capitol because they wanted a tour? That these were just, this was a sort of explicitly political outcome, that there was no constitutional or underlying concern for the nation. And I'm hoping Americans are reflecting on that, because if they're not, we're in bigger trouble than we may realize. This day was very sobering in so many respects, and I hope people take it seriously. It is a shame. I'm embarrassed as a Republican for a whole lot of reasons, but especially given today, Republicans decided, we don't need to participate in this. It's no big deal. This is all politics. It's not all politics. In fact, it's not politics at all. And I think the president today made that very clear, Ari. He leaned into this moment and he called the thing what it was, what we all know it is. He called out Donald Trump. He called out Republicans who support and perpetuate the big lie. And I think that's something the country should take notice of.
I hope people take notice. I'm really listening to you. And as you were speaking, we're looking at some of these images new from today, the president's speech. The ceremony on the House floor will be joined later by a member of the January 6th committee. And it is a time where people across the country, Maya, they will have a moment to see this. Between television and the internet and the images, it will be a thing that people do know what tonight is, even if they're not people who always follow the news closely. And they may even be reminded of some of what happened right after the terrible attack, when there were a few moments where people in both parties, and thus including the Republicans who were not participating today, seemed to say, whoa, this is worse than some braced for, and this must be stopped, and this was a Republican insurrection. Take a look at some of how that sounded then.
The president bears responsibility for Wednesday's attack on Congress by mob rioters.
They were provoked by the president and other powerful people.
The president needs to understand that his actions were the problem, not the solution.
The president's language and rhetoric crossed a line.
The mob was fed lies.
And it was reckless.
He should have immediately denounced the mob when he saw what was unfolding.
All I can say is count me out. Enough is enough.
Maya, it is a fact of public life that within 1 year later, most of those individuals have counted themselves back in.
And unfortunately, it didn't take a year. It wasn't long after those speeches that they counted themselves back in. And one thing, I think what Michael said was so dead on, and I can't help but feel that we have a Michael Steele as a Republican saying what he's saying, and unfortunately, he feels too much like a unicorn. That's actually the problem for democracy. Not that we have different parties and different views and different beliefs and different experiences. It's that when we have a simple factual truth, we do not all accept it. And that's the greatest danger to democracy. And what we experienced today was a reminder that the trauma of that day, one, it is not over for the members of Congress that survived it. It is not over for the Capitol Police officers who defended them. It is certainly not over for the families that lost loved ones, because people did die that day. But it's not over for a nation traumatized by the fact that what we believed to be the strongest democracy on the planet saw a kind of violence and insurrection. And what we really heard and what has been unfolding from the January 6th committee is really a message that's like violent overthrow is bad. Peaceful coup, even if it's the theft of the election, that's okay. And that's what I hear now when I think about those words from Republicans shortly after the violence, and really what we're hearing today, including your interview with Peter Navarro. It's just the violence that made it a problem, not the fact that it was a coup.
And the president spoke about that today and the ongoing open efforts to suppress the vote and otherwise end democracy. Take a look, Michael.
The former president and his supporters have decided the only way for them to win is to suppress your vote and subvert our elections. It's wrong. It's undemocratic. And frankly, it's un-American. You can't obey the law only when it's convenient.
Michael?
Yeah, he's absolutely right about that. And again, for the president to reframe the narrative of this past year the way he did today stands in stark relief against the backdrop of what Republicans are promoting and what they're refusing to acknowledge. Certainly flies in the face of everything that Donald Trump is saying. And again, I go back to the point. How is the country receiving this? How is the country looking at this? Yeah, I get it. We're concerned about inflation. We're concerned about, gas prices, and we're concerned about all these other things. COVID, our lives are, have been turned upside down over the past year, but nothing pales. Nothing stands up against, nothing overshadows the idea that all of this could get stripped away like that if we're not careful. That the last thing you'll be concerned about is the price of gasoline when you can't vote. The last thing you're going to be concerned about is whether or not you got health care here or not there when the government is telling you that you're not favored by President Trump. What do you do then? And for all those folks who are dancing around that burnt up Christmas tree of Trump, right? All of you who are just like, Hosanna, hey, Hosanna, ha. What do you do when they come after you? What do you do when you step over the line and say something the wrong way, or Trump in his maniacal fashion decides he didn't like the way you said something, Lindsay? What do you say then? What do you do then? Were you lying to us when you stood in the well of the Congress and said the things that were just played in the clip? Or are you lying now, lying to yourself? That's where we are. And the question is, how are you, those folks out here watching and listening and taking all this in, what are you thinking? What are you going to do about it? How do you respond to it? Because every sign tells me, Ari, these people are about to reelect these Republicans and put them back in charge of the House, potentially put them back in charge of the Senate, and are damn sure lining up to go bring Donald Trump back in. And what are you going to say on January 23rd or October of 2023 when Donald Trump is purging people in retribution for the big lie he told?
I'll let that sit for a second. I hope people are listening. Those are the questions. I want to thank Michael and Maya for taking this seriously on a tough day for America and joining us. Thank you both.